Welcome into Locked On Phillies. Today, I will react to what Dave Dombrowski said yesterday in his media availability about the offseason plans for the Philadelphia Phillies. All that and more on today's Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I am your host, Connor Thomas. Been talking Phils baseball for years over on 97.5 The Fanatic. Happy to be here with you as your host of Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you, as always, for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, on the Odyssey app, anywhere you consume your content. You can find Locked On Phillies there. So I appreciate everyone who's downloading, rating, reviewing, subscribing, doing all that good stuff. You're very much appreciated for checking us out here on Locked On Phillies. Now today, a big episode as we recap, what President of Baseball Operations Dave Dombrowski had to say yesterday. I know he had his press conference before yesterday's episode. I tweeted it out from our Locked On Phillies account at LO_Phillies on Twitter, but I recorded yesterday's episode before Dombrowski met with the media. So I apologize for this being slightly delayed, but I've got a lot to break down on today's episode about what Dave Dombrowski had to say yesterday in front of the assembled media. Now, Dombrowski, he went a while. It was nearly a 40-minute press conference, which is awesome because not only does it give me a lot of content to break down for you out there listening to Locked On Phillies or watching Locked On Phillies if you're watching us on YouTube, but what it also means is we got a lot of his thought process. And while some of the answers weren't exactly answers, we did get to jump inside the mind of Dave Dombrowski a little bit and get a better idea of what the plan is for the Philadelphia Phillies offseason. So I'm going to break this down into two different segments. We're going to start with comments about players currently on the team. And next segment, we're going to get into comments about the acquisition of new players. So the very first thing we're going to start with, and I discussed in Monday's episode when I talked about what I want to hear from Dave Dombrowski when he does have this press conference, and that's the Bryce Harper elbow injury. We now know that Bryce Harper will be going under the knife. He will be getting some type of elbow surgery or procedure on Wednesday, November 23rd. So this coming Wednesday, a week from yesterday, he will go ahead and he will get everything checked out. He will have some type of procedure. Now, Dave Dombrowski said they're not yet sure what type of procedure it is. They don't know if it's going to be more similar to Rhys Hoskins' elbow injury that was a 4 to 6 month recovery time. Will it be full Tommy John? Will it be something procedural? They don't know yet. The surgeon has to get in there and check everything out. So we will have full news on Bryce Harper either Wednesday or Thursday, depending on what time we get the information about the surgery and what time the procedure finishes and everything there. But Dave Dombrowski did say he'd expect it to slow Harper up a bit, which to me means they are expecting him to miss some time in the season upcoming. But Dombrowski wouldn't commit to a timeline or anything one way or another, wouldn't say whether or not it is actually Tommy John because, as he put it, that's up to the doctor to get in there, look around, and see exactly what needs to be done to get Bryce Harper back to full strength. So basically it's hey, we have a date for when he's going to get a procedure done. We don't know what the procedure is going to be, and we don't know how long it's going to take. So a small piece of the puzzle has been put out there. I guess we kind of have like, you know how you do the puzzle, you do the outline first, you get all the end pieces. Well, we have the end pieces. We know Wednesday, November 23rd, he's getting something done with his elbow. Now we got to fill in the rest of the picture, and we will hear about that in about a week's time. So that's the very first thing that I wanted to hear. Not a huge answer, but some type of information. Another thing that he said that I thought was interesting, I knew he was going to be asked about, the position at first base. How he's handling Rhys Hoskins, what the future is with Rhys Hoskins and this baseball team, being that this is the last year of arbitration for Rhys Hoskins. He will be a free agent following the 2023 season. And that lends to, hey, do you potentially move him to try and get something for him rather than losing the free agency at the end of the year if you don't think you can or want to re-sign him? Is there a potential position change coming at first base because Rhys Hoskins' defense was not up to snuff in 2022. And Dave Dombrowski, rightfully so, and good job by the Philly media, was asked about all this stuff. And the biggest comment that I thought was interesting with Rhys Hoskins was he said that Rhys Hoskins is not a perfect player. His defense he's not a gold glove first baseman. He's a streaky hitter, and these are all things that we've talked about at length here on Locked On Phillies. So Dave Dombrowski agrees with both of those sentiments. But what he did say kind of jokingly is, hey, we've tendered a contract with him. And when you tender a contract with somebody, well, you're tying yourself to that person. So it seemed jokingly to me. He said he's the leader in the clubhouse to be your starter at first base on opening day. What that sounds like to me is if you were expecting Rhys Hoskins to get moved this offseason, the plan is not for that to happen. The plan is for him to play first base for this team next year in very much the same capacity that he did in 2022. Now, I don't think that means that if somebody calls Dave Dombrowski with a ridiculous offer on Rhys Hoskins, he's like, no, we can't move him. I don't know that that's locking Rhys Hoskins into being with the team in 2023. What I do think that means is it's going to take a lot to get Rhys Hoskins away from the Phillies. And if he is on this team, there won't be a position change. It'll be him at first base. So anyone who thinks, oh, maybe move Kyle Schwarber to first base when Harper comes back, no. Anyone who thinks, okay, can Alec Boehm flip over? Like I was initially thinking, hey, maybe try that. No, it sounds like Rhys Hoskins is going to be at first base for 2023. And that could very well be his last season with the Philadelphia Phillies. And Dave Dombrowski also said something interesting that will segue us into what we're going to talk about next, which is the acquisition of new players. He was asked multiple times about middle infield, partially because of the free agent class at shortstop, partially because of losing. And Dave Dombrowski was very careful to say guys like Noah Syndergaard, guys like Kyle Gibson, guys like Gene Segura, they haven't technically lost them yet. They're no longer under contract, but they're free agents. Those guys can potentially come back. They'll have to work on a new contract with them and outbid other teams and everything like that. But they're not technically gone yet until they sign with another team. But with the loss of Gene Segura, we'll call it a loss because I do not think Gene Segura is back with this team in 2023, despite how much I would like him to be here, be a part of this team. And there's probably a lot of guys in the locker room and maybe you out there listening who's like, I would love to have Gene Segura back. But you want to try and upgrade at the position. There are opportunities out there to do that. Dave Dombrowski did say, though, that they really want Bryson Stott to play, which we already knew. He said they only think Bryson Stott's going to get better. So you're looking at him to play either second base or shortstop, and he fits better into the second base role, though, because Dave Dombrowski mentioned that they feel comfortable with Edmundo Sosa at shortstop, which sounds laughable when you think about the free agent shortstops available. Not a knock on Edmundo Sosa. I think he's a very talented player and a great utility guy. Really good at third when Alec Boehm needs a night off. Really good at shortstop when Gene Segura needed a night off, and we'll see how shortstop works out this year. Can play second base, no problem. Like Edmundo Sosa is a talented utility infielder for the Philadelphia Phillies. So I don't mean this as a Edmundo Sosa can play shortstop. No, we know he can. But going to the World Series does not mean the next offseason the path is to move from Gene Segura at shortstop or Bryson Stott at shortstop to Edmundo Sosa at shortstop. No, I'm not really looking at that as an option. I don't think Dave Dombrowski is either. I think he's just looking at the guys on the roster currently and saying, hey, we have faith in him as kind of the safety net, but there's some stuff coming up that he said that makes me very, very sure that the Philadelphia Phillies are going to be aggressive in the free agent shortstop market. And one of those things actually deals with pitching a little bit. How does that all factor in? Well, Dave Dombrowski had more, I would say, to say about, or more interesting things to say, rather, because he talked plenty about players currently on the team and everything, fielded about 20 questions on Bryce Harper's elbow. But I think the more interesting part of the press conference that he had yesterday is what he had to say about the approach heading into the offseason. We will discuss that coming up next as we continue this episode of Locked On Phillies. First, though, I want to tell you about my friends over at Simply Safe. One of the most important things in my life, and really everybody's life, it's family. Your family is important to you. My family's important to me. That's something that's inherent to us. It's just part of life that you want to protect, not just the things you care about, but the people you care about. And to me, having my mom live alone in New Jersey, where in the childhood house my brother and I grew up in, it was a little bit unnerving to move out and leave her on her own. She's got our family dog is there, but he's a 12-pound miniature pinscher. He's not really doing much to protect her. So you got to find a company that you trust for the security of your house. And we had a break in at that house shortly after my brother and I moved out. Luckily, my mom wasn't home at the time, but they took some jewelry, they stole some stuff, and it kind of breaks your sense of security. Well, we got it back by getting her Simply Safe. Simply Safe is awesome. It's the premier, I'm telling you, premier, because we wouldn't have gone with anything less to protect my mom's safety, my dog's safety, my childhood home's safety and security. It's customizable, so you don't have to go with the full package of everything like you're protecting Fort Knox, though you could. But if you want to go with something a little bit lighter, you can do that. Sensors, cameras, everything like that is perfectly available. They have 24/7 monitoring agents that can reach out to you anytime they think something's going wrong. So they're very proactive in that. It's great. I mean, they're the only people, only company I trust with the safety of my mom and my childhood home and my dog. So go ahead and check out Simply Safe. And the best part, go ahead and check out Simply Safe at simplysafe.com/lockedonMLB. And you could take advantage of their biggest sale of the year, 50% off a new security setup through Simply Safe. That's 50%, half off. It's incredible. All you have to do is go ahead and check them out through the URL of simplysafe.com/lockedonMLB. Because, folks, I tell you all the time, there's no safe like Simply Safe. All right, now Dave Dombrowski also talked about the acquisition of new players. Of course, we knew he was going to field questions on the shortstop market. We knew he was going to field questions about the pitching options out there. And he talked lightly about the bullpen. There was nothing that exciting to me in the bullpen conversation that he had yesterday during his media availability. But the place we're going to start is we're going to start with the starting pitching and what he said about that. Now, maybe this factors into what I was talking about earlier with players already on the roster. But he talked about Aaron Nola, Zack Wheeler, and Ranger Suarez. And then that leaves two spots. And he basically broke down that those two spots, he wants to save one for a young pitcher, whether that's Griff McGarry coming up from the minor league system, whether that's Bailey Falter, who has made some spot starts with the team, but is still a young starter who they haven't really totally handed the reins of a spot in the rotation over to, whether it's Christopher Sanchez, who made a couple of spot starts for them, or maybe it's even Andrew Painter or Mick Abel, one of the young studs that's a little lower down in the minor league system, but a potential to rise the ranks and see them in 2023. Yeah, so opportunity there for young pitchers. But the veteran pitcher, well, they don't really have a guy like that. So that means going out and getting somebody. But Dave Dombrowski was careful to say that going after pitching, he thinks more about pitching depth, and it doesn't have to be one of the top end starters. What that means to me is they're going to be looking at a guy on a 1-year deal or maybe a 2-year deal, depending on who it is, but very similar to what they gave Kyle Gibson and what Kyle Gibson was when they acquired him in the Spencer Howard trade with the Texas Rangers 2 years ago. A veteran with some upside that's not going to be a top of the rotation guy, but can slot into 4 or 5 in the rotation behind Wheeler, Nola, and Suarez and work everything out from there. So it sounds like from his initial comments, those of you that want them to go out and go get Carlos Rodon, not really something that I'd expect just based on Dave Dombrowski's comments. But hey, he didn't say we're not going to go get Carlos Rodon. He just said that depth is probably, and this is stuff that I'm inferring, he basically said we could add depth. We're looking at our depth. It doesn't have to be a top-end starter, which to me says they're not looking at a top-end starter. But we'll see how that plays out. Of more interest, of course, is the shortstop market. And something that Dave Dombrowski said yesterday during his media availability that kind of hinted towards this, and he mentioned multiple times, hey, we have Edmundo Sosa, we have Bryce Harper up the middle. We're going to explore everything. But he wouldn't specifically say, hey, we're looking at the shortstop market and we're looking at these guys. The most he would say is we're exploring options, which playing the cards slightly close to the vest. Smart if you're a man in the position of Dave Dombrowski, where you have a lot of money to spend and you don't really have to advertise who you're going after, especially with 4 options in the shortstop market. If it was just Trey Turner available and Carlos Correa and Xander Bogaerts and Dansby Swanson didn't exist, maybe you'd get a different answer. But I think he's playing it cautiously, and I think that's a prudent approach for Dave Dombrowski. But here's the biggest hint, right? Somebody asked him about the luxury tax and what the spending for the luxury tax would be. And basically, the expression he used was, we're going to try and move the needle. And he believes that this is a championship caliber club based on what they did this past year, making it to the World Series, making it within 2 games of winning the World Series. And I don't think anyone would debate that the Philadelphia Phillies are absolutely in a championship winning window. They were 2 games away from it last year. You'd be crazy to say they weren't. So, how does that affect their ability to spend? Well, Dave Dombrowski said that he would prefer not to go over the luxury tax, but he's not saying that they won't go over it. Here's why he would prefer not going over the luxury tax. Penalties on draft picks, penalties on the actual tax that you have to pay. And if your boss gives you a budget, you always want to come in under budget. John Middleton is Dave Dombrowski's boss. And John Middleton's budget is not necessarily the luxury tax, but that's kind of the benchmark for where you want to spend, right? Here's how I look at it. Dave Dombrowski and John Middleton are the married couple buying the new house for the first time. And they're saying, like, for example, we got a budget of $250,000. The market's crazy right now, so that probably doesn't get you much, but bear with me. You know, when you go to buy a new house and you have this budget and it's like, oh, $250,000, or you go and you're like, I want to buy a new car. I want it to be like $25,000. And then the realtor or the car salesman shows you something and you're like, wow, I love that. But it's like $50,000 over budget house-wise, or it's $10,000 over budget what I wanted to spend on the new car. But you're like, man, really nice item, really nice house, really nice car. Okay, we can go a little over budget. You would like to be under budget, but you kind of have an idea that something out there is going to tickle your fancy and you're willing to go over for it. That's what I think Dave Dombrowski was saying when he says, I'd prefer to be under the luxury tax, but I'm not saying we're going to be. And he said again after that he wants to make this team a championship caliber club. Thinks they're already there pretty much, but that you want to continue to improve. Do something, again, we'll go back to his other expression, that moves the needle. Hey, Trey Turner would be part of moving the needle. So, yeah, I expect them to be aggressive in the pursuit of one of the top free agents this year in the shortstop class. And we've hit that already. Trey Turner, Xander Bogaerts, Dansby Swanson, Carlos Correa. Dave Dombrowski didn't say anything to me that would dispute the claim that I've made that I think the Phillies are going to go after those guys or one of those guys heavily. So that's all good news. And the other thing that he mentioned, just kind of in passing, that I want to talk about before we move on from the Dave Dombrowski presser review, basically, he said that all the money coming off the books gives them some flexibility. That's it. That's a coy statement. It seems like innocent enough. Oh, well, we've got a lot of money coming off the books. It gives us flexibility. To me, what that says is, yo, I got money to spend. I'm going to go spend it somewhere important. I'm going to go get one of those top shortstops, maybe a top starter if shortstop doesn't work. Listen, I think it's the shortstop market. And I think we all know that. But the whole Dave Dombrowski saying, yeah, we have some flexibility because we have a lot of money coming off the books, says, here's the translation, right? Have you seen the old Key and Peele sketch with the anger translator for Obama, where it's like he's the president, he can't say stuff, but then there's the guy next to him translating what he actually means? I'll translate for Dave Dombrowski. I'm going out to sign somebody big because I want this team to win a freaking championship, and I got the money to do it. That's basically what he's saying in a very innocent, quiet statement saying, oh, yeah, we got some money off the books. We're flexible now. Yeah. So everything good with the Dave Dombrowski presser. The Bryce Harper sit and wait. The Rhys Hoskins comments, it kind of is what it is at this point. You kind of come to expect that's what the response was going to be. Going to test the shortstop market and see what you got there. And starting pitching, yeah, maybe a depth piece, but it shows that he is thinking about it and he's well aware of the need to improve that as well. So, hey, good stuff from Dave Dombrowski. And that is probably as much as we're going to hear from him for a while now. So, soak it in. Think about what he said, and that is how I view it affecting the Phillies offseason going forward. So, we're somewhat on plan with the blueprint I laid out last week, somewhat off with the Rhys Hoskins stuff and everything there, potentially bringing Gene Segura back, moving Alec Boehm. That stuff seems unlikely now, but yeah, it's going similarly planned to what we all expected, which is good news. Let's see how they execute it now over the next couple months. Now, coming up, we're going to wrap up with a quick player review. We're going to go with the starting pitching now because we did basically all of the starters on offense, all the fielders and everything. So let's do the starting pitching. And we're going to start with the ace of the staff. Who does that make you think of? I'm going to let you ponder that as we move on to the next segment of Locked On Phillies. First, though, I want to tell you about my friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net. They're your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer to esports. Listen to all this stuff going on. The NBA, cooking. The NHL, cooking. NFL, we're getting into the meat of the schedule. There's some playoff pushes going to be coming up. The World Cup's starting. There's so much good stuff happening in the world of sports, and they've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Okay, when you think about ace of the Philadelphia Phillies staff, who came to mind? There's only really two guys to discuss, but was it Aaron Nola or was it Zack Wheeler? Well, for me, and I'm a big Aaron Nola guy, despite his postseason struggles, I long defended him as a guy that can pitch big innings for this team. And there were points where he proved it this year. There were points where he disproved it this year. But that'll be discussed in his season review. The ace of this staff is undoubtedly still Zack Wheeler, and he had an outstanding 2022. Listen to these numbers. The win-loss, 12-7. Whatever. Win, I think, is a misleading stat for pitchers, and that's something a lot of people around baseball understand. But I'll tell you what isn't misleading. The 2.82 ERA that he had this year. 2.82 ERA in 153 innings pitched. I know he had some injury issues down the stretch, but man, the strikeout numbers 163 and 153 innings. Last year, it was 247 and 213 innings. So 247 strikeouts. He led the league last season. This year, a couple injury issues. He started off the season kind of rough because of a shoulder issue and an illness. He ended the season kind of rough because of another issue with the throwing arm. But when he was available, he was the best pitcher on this team. The ERA of 2.82, that's outstanding. The whip of 1.039, about a base runner an inning, could be a little bit lower, but you'll absolutely take that from one of your top guys. Home run per nine, under a home run per 9.8. Walk per 9, too. So you'd like to see the accuracy a little bit better, but man, strikeout to walk ratio of 4.79 is the second highest in his career, only trailing last year when he was the Cy Young Award winner runner-up. Where will he rank in the Cy Young Award this year? I'd imagine he's probably going to be, well, I don't know, because with the innings down, I don't know exactly where he'll go. Aaron Nola could be ranked higher simply because of the amount of innings that each of those guys pitched. But when the two are available, your best pitcher is Zack Wheeler. Here's my issue with Zack Wheeler's season, right? Down the stretch, he fatigued, he had injury, and I can't totally fault him for injury, but it's a long season. And we've kind of seen it with Zack Wheeler, where down near the end of the season, he kind of trails off a little bit. That's troubling for guys to have playoff success. And listen, it happens to Verlander. It happened to Clayton Kershaw. It still does. It happens to some great pitchers. So I'm not saying it makes him not a great pitcher, but that's a little bit worrisome. The first time we saw a really long season from Zack Wheeler getting into the playoffs and everything. So how does that affect him moving forward? We'll see. But when he was on the field, when he was on the mound, Zack Wheeler was the best starting pitcher on this team, and he put forth an incredible effort for the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, what's Wheeler's best start of the year or best moment of the year? Honestly, it's a great question. What start do I want to give it to? There was a stretch in the middle of the season where he handled 2 games against the St. Louis Cardinals and was just absolutely shut down. Is it that? Well, I'll tell you what I got to give it to. I have to go ahead and look at the NL wildcard game 1 and the effort that Zack Wheeler put in that game to kind of get everything started. I know he had situations. He had a great start against the Atlanta Braves in the NLDS. He had a great start in the NLDS that was ruined by Rhys Hoskins' error there. That was a great one, but they lost the game. He had a great start in the NLCS. No, you know what? Actually, I'm flipping. I'm calling it audible. His NLCS Game 1 start against the San Diego Padres that the Phillies won 2-0 was his seminal performance of the year. 7 innings pitched, 1 hit giving up. No runs, no earned runs, only 1 walk, 8 strikeouts, no home runs allowed. It was just great work by Zack Wheeler. Of course, the Phillies end up winning that game 2-0 against the San Diego Padres off of the Bryce Harper opposite field home run and the Kyle Schwarber moonshot. He outduels, say whatever you want, Yu Darvish, and he puts the Phillies in position to win the NLCS in 5 games. That was the start of the year, and while he didn't have good starts in the World Series, he's still a guy that was the ace of the squad, and for that, I'm going to give Zack Wheeler an A- for the 2022 season, just because I think he has more in the tank and the injuries kind of derailed him and he wasn't great in the biggest spot of the year, but man, he certainly deserves something in the A range. I'm going to go A- for Zack Wheeler's 2022 season, and you hope that becomes an A or an A+ next year with a return to Cy Young form. That's all my time for today's Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Now make your next listen Locked On Sports Today. Check them out on YouTube, the Odyssey app, wherever you get your podcast. The biggest breaking news from around sports, basketball, football, hockey, baseball when it comes back, the World Cup, everything. Locked On Sports has you covered, so go ahead and check them out. And make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing on YouTube, all the good stuff wherever you get your podcast. Leave a like, leave a comment, interact a little bit. I'm trying to be more interactive on the YouTube these days with no games going on. So appreciate everyone who's doing that already. And thank you for following along with Locked On Phillies. I will talk to you again tomorrow on the Friday edition of Locked On Phillies.